Now the next thing we're going to do is kick out our leg out the back of our back panel. So we're going to rotate our object around to where we can see the back. And I'm going to click on the back to center me right there on the back. And I'm going to create something called a construction line. Construction lines let us line up things so that they're in the right places. To do this, I'm going to say create a sketch. I'm going to create a sketch right on the back of my object, my back here. And I'm going to come over here and click on line. And I'm going to come over here and tell it in my sketch palette, I'm going to say make it a construction line. And all a construction line does is it's just used for sort of lining things up. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click somewhere on here. I don't care where. I'm going to click, so see how I get the X? That means I'm on the edge of my back. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to drag straight over. I don't want a degree like this. I want it to be a 0 degree straight across until I get, and it snaps to this edge here, and then click again. Okay. And that just made a construction line. I know it's a construction line because it's a dashed line. So that tells me, hey, this is just for lining things up. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my construction lines now. And now I want this construction line. It's going to line up where the leg kicks out at. I'm going to have this be a certain distance from the bottom to up here. So I've already taken that measurement, and on mine it's 3.5 centimeters. Yours will be a little different. Now to make this actually 3.5 centimeters from here to the bottom, I'm going to use the dimensioning tool. So I'm going to push the letter D, and I'm going to click on this line, and I'm going to say, okay, I want the distance to this line. So I click on this bottom of the phone, and notice how it's giving me the distance between the two. Click over here, off to the side, and I'm going to type in 3.5 because that's where I want it to be, and I'm going to click enter. And it just moved my construction line down. Now I know this line is 3.5 centimeters from the bottom. That's going to allow me to set up my next movement. So you can see what we're doing. We need to kick, let me rotate back around so we can see the right and the back. We need to kick the leg out the back of the phone, straight out the back this way, so that when it tips down, it's resting on it. To do that, we're going to go back and look at the back square on. We're going to create a rectangle that's right on this line. This is going to be our leg. It's sort of a strange way of doing it. Now the thickness that I'm going to use is that same 0.3. So I'm going to just click here, use my dimensioning tool, so push letter D. I'm going to click on this outside edge here. Whoops. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can click it. So you can see how I have the blue line here. I'm going to click it, drag it over, and I want that to be 0.3. When I hit enter, it's going to pull that down to 0.3. Okay. And now I have a leg that's the same width as my base, and that is the correct thickness of the wood. Now here's where the strange thing is that we're going to do. We're going to use this little thin rectangle to extrude out the leg and just like pull it out to the edges. So what I'm going to do is hit the E button for extrude, and then I'm going to rotate out to that perspective view so I can see what's going on. And I'm going to click back because I need to be able to actually see how I'm not highlighting. I'm going to highlight that rectangle on the back side. So I'm going to rotate back around to the back side by clicking on that top corner here. And I'm going to click here, and then notice I can pull it out and I can make that leg come out as far as I want it to. So it's kind of a weird way to make something, to extrude it out at its side like that, but it's a powerful thing you can do in Fusion 360. Now how far do I want it to come out? Well, that's a great question. So I need to take that measurement from that inside of the notch where the leg touches the back all the way to that back leg, including the extra tab for the sort of landscape design. We'll cut the pieces out of it later. So we need to do that, and we need to extrude it out the front as well. So we're going to actually come up here, and we're going to do a two-sided extrusion, and we're not going to do symmetric. We're going to do just a two-sided extrusion. That way we can have the front side extrude less than the back side. And when it does that, notice it says a side 1 and a side 2. I'm going to have this distance on mine ends up being 8.5 centimeters. So you can see it just moved it out 8.5 centimeters for me. I don't want any taper. We'll deal with that on some other projects. And then side 2, so this is going to stick it out the front. I'm going to say this one for me ends up being 1.2 centimeters out the front. Now something interesting happened. Because my extrusion passed through another object, it thinks that I want to cut that object. So my whole thing went to red. So now it's in a cut mode. You can see down here at the bottom it says it's going to cut the object. I don't want to do that. I want to, instead of cut, I want to create a new component. So right now I'm going to have 2 components. I'm going to have a component for my back and one for my leg. So click on New Component and then click OK. And now we can see, give it a second to catch up, and now we can see that what we've done is we've created our phone stand. So if we let this go and it fell, it would tip down and hit the back right there. Now, notice that we just created a new component in our browser menu. So this new component, you can see when I click on it, it turns it blue. We're going to rename this component. Just double click on component and name it leg. Now we'd love to have a component here listed that's for our back. So we need to do that now as well. And to do that, we're going to go to Create and then New Component. Now at first it wants to create an empty component, but we actually want to create it from something we've already made. So here we're going to create it from bodies, and a body is just a shape in Fusion 360. And now ask me which body. I'm going to say, okay, I want this one. Notice how it grays the whole thing. So this is going to be the body that we're going to have into our other component. That's going to make a new component. Let's click OK. Now we have component 2, and let's double click on this one and call this one the back. Now that we have them both as separate components, watch what we can do. We can say, hey, hide the leg. Okay, show the leg. Hide the back. Show the back. So we can do those things. Now what we're going to do is take the leg, let's hide the back for a second, and we need to cut the shapes out of this part of our of the leg. We need to cut in the little shapes we want to have. And then we're going to use those shapes to cut the back later. So I'm going to turn the back on, and I'm going to say, well, let's create a sketch. Because remember, everything starts with sketches in Fusion 360. We're going to click on the top of the leg here so that we can rotate and draw on that leg. Now notice up here that this is the front. So the down area, this is the front down here, and this is the back of the leg. So I'm going to click on top to recenter myself. And I need to be able to know where this back is, because we're going to hide it in just a second. So to be able to tell where something is on your sketch plane, we need to do what's called a projection. So come here to Create and go down to Project. Project. Or just letter P. It's a really useful thing to have. So we're going to say I want this, this, and this to be projected down on the plane so I can see it. If I tip it up at an angle, you can see what's happened. On my drawing plane with my leg, it's drawn this, this, and this shape projected down on it. So now I know where the back goes through the leg. If I remove those 3 things up here, notice when I hide the back, I don't know where it is anymore. So when I do a projection though, and I say, okay, project this surface, and this surface, and then I hide the leg, or sorry, I hide the back, I can still see where the back passes through my plane. So I can use it to draw stuff on. So once I have that, I'm going to click OK. And now I have my drawings here. I can go back to my top view. So that's where the leg is going to go through. I need to cut my tabs out of that. Now as I'm looking at this, my tab ends up being, the middle chunk that cut out ended up being 2.5 centimeters wide. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, move my sketch around. I'm going to grab a rectangle tool. Now this is the front, this is the back. I'm going to just draw a rectangle in the middle. I don't care how big it is. What I do care about is that starts on this back purple line and ends somewhere on the face here. We'll resize it, everything with the dimensioning tool. So I've got this now, and I'm going to hit the D for dimensioning. And I'm going to say, okay, this size, click there, click there. This needs to be, let's say it's 3 centimeters on mine. That's what I measured mine to be. And now notice how this isn't in the right place. Like it's not centered and I want it to be centered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to center it. I'm going to do that. I'm going to use a constraint. So constraints are sort of things that set certain values to be the same. On this time, I'm going to use the midpoint constraint. That'll line up the midpoint of 2 objects. So I click here, and then I need to click the 2 things that I want to midpoint. Notice the little triangle on my cursor. I want this line to be in the middle of this overall purple line. So I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to click here, and it's going to scooch it over and put a little triangle here, letting me know that it's midpointed between these 2 things, and now it's right directly in the middle. So at this point, we've got our rectangle that we're going to cut out. We want to get rid of this middle point and just leave these 2 outside ones. So we're going to do an extrude, just like we did before. I'm going to rotate this around so I can kind of see the direction it's going to extrude. It's asking me, what do I want to extrude? So I want to click this section and this section. I don't need a shift click or anything, do anything fancy. Just clicking both will do it. It's going to ask me what I want to do, and I'm going to drag it instead of up, which would make a piece. It would add some material. I'm going to drag it down, and it's going to automatically cut for me, leaving those 2 tabs on either side like I like. So I'm going to say, it says cut here. Notice it says cut here. And I'm going to say OK. And how far I drag it down doesn't matter. As long as you make it through the bottom of the material, you're totally good. So even just something small like that would be totally fine. I'm going to click OK, and it's going to cut that material out. Boom. Looks beautiful. I'm going to click back to the top view and take a look at it. Zoom out a little bit, drag it down. That is my front side.